the thrilling conclusion to chapter 15. And then the thing I always dread happened. Mrs. Wright blew her whistle. Screech! I was jittery enough as it was, but that shrill blast almost made me jump out of my fur coat. "Everyone, stop where you are!" she shouted. I stopped. The music stopped. The whirling and twirling and prancing stopped. Even Miss Lark stopped screaming. Mrs. Brisbane ran onto the stage, gently picked me up, and held me in the palm of her hand. I was trembling from all the excitement and the whistle, but she stroked my back with her finger, and that calmed me down. She stepped to the front of the stage and spoke to the audience. "Families and friends," she said. "Some of you may not have met Humphrey the hamster. He's the classroom pet in room 26, and we all love him. I don't know how he got in here." She shot a knowing look back in Daniel's direction. "But everyone seems to be safe and sound. So, do you think we should try the number again?" The audience cheered and clapped. Someone yelled, "Encore!" which I think means some more. Mrs. Brisbane carefully handed me to Joey. "Don't take your eyes off him," she said. "I won't," Joey promised. He also gave my back a soft and reassuring rub. Mrs. Brisbane helped Miss Lark off her chair. She still looked a little shaky, but she went over to her keyboard. Mrs. Brisbane got everyone back in place, took me back from Joey, and moved to the far side of the cage. 1, 2, 3, Miss Lark began again. I carefully peeked over the edge of Mrs. Brisbane's hand, and I was amazed at what I saw and heard. Every note was perfect. Every prance and whinny, every jingle and jangle, every whirl and twirl was wonderful. Until, all of a sudden, whee! Joey stopped in the middle of a whinny. He was staring at the door. I twisted my head to look. A tall man with a bright red cap was standing in the doorway smiling. He took off his cap and waved it. I looked back at Joey. He was waving too. His great big smile let me know that the man was Joey's dad. He'd made it. Then Joey opened up his mouth wide and let out his biggest whinny yet. Whee! When the number was finished, the audience stood up and applauded. Mrs. Lark made my friends take a bow. "Bravo!" the crowd shouted. "Bravo!" I squeaked. I wasn't exactly sure what it meant, but I knew it was something good. Our class left the stage, and Mrs. Brisbane rushed me back to room 26 and my cozy cage. "Humphrey, I don't know how that happened, but please don't ever do that again. I almost fainted," she said. Me too, I squeaked. "Boing, boing, boing," Og twanged. "Don't worry, Og. I'll tell you all about it," I said. Mrs. Brisbane went back to the gym, and while we were alone, I described everything to Og. When I told him the part about Mrs. Lark, he hopped up and down, saying, "Boing, boing, boing, boing." And then, when I told him about Joey's dad and the cheering at the end, he dived into the water and splashed happily. Then I rested while I waited. My friends all went home with their families, but Mr. and Mrs. Brisbane came back to room 26 to pick up Og and me. Mr. Brisbane was chuckling as they entered the room. "You certainly put on a show that no one will forget," he said. "Not as long as they live." "You know who to thank for that," she said. "Humphrey. It seems that Daniel put him in his pocket for good luck." "It turned out to be good luck for all," her husband agreed. Ms. Wright popped her head in the doorway. "Is the hamster all right?" she asked. Mrs. Brisbane assured her that I was fine. Good thing I had this. Mrs. Wright fingered her whistle. Have a wonderful holiday. And she popped her head out of the doorway again. I have to say, I could have done without the whistle, but it was nice to hear that Mrs. Wright cared if I was all right. The door opened again and Mrs. Lark entered. Sue, I'm so embarrassed about what happened, she said. I apologize. I told the students to keep calm and focus, but I didn't follow my own advice. It turned out all right in the end, Mrs. Brisbane said. But tell me, why are you so afraid of a little hamster? I don't know, Mrs. Lark said. I've always been terrified of animals. My mother said I must have been scared of something furry when I was a baby. Well, that's a shame, Mr. Brisbane said. I know, Mrs. Lark agreed. I wish I could change. Well, you can go on break now knowing that you put on a great show, Mrs. Brisbane said. Well, the children did all the work, Miss Lark said. Oh, there you are, Mr. Morales said from the doorway. He was wearing a candy-striped tie with his suit and Santa hat on his head. Congratulations, he told Miss Lark. You were right about the show. We'll have to do this every year. What about the part with the, hamster? She asked. Mr. Morales laughed so hard his Santa hat shook. Believe me, Mary, that was the best part of all. Humphrey's Winter Wonderings. I wonder how the show would have gone if Daniel hadn't put me in his pocket. It would have been entertaining, but not nearly as exciting.